the master who terrifies the superiors was forced to marry an inactive man. The sleek black sedan rolled to a stop before the towering iron gates of the Justin estate. Inside, Stephanie sat perfectly still, her plain cotton dress a stark contrast to the opulence beyond the windshield. The driver cleared his throat nervously. "Miss Stephanie, we'll need to use the side entrance today." "Why?" "The main gate, there's been an issue with the mechanism." Master Larry's orders. Through the tinted window, Stephanie watched as a familiar figure emerged onto the marble steps, Larry James, the adopted golden son, his designer suit catching the afternoon sun. He wore that smile. The one that never reached his eyes. "Miss Stephanie doesn't need the grand entrance anyway," a maid's voice drifted through the open estate windows. "She's been living like a street rat for 20 years. The side door is generous enough." "Hush. What if she hears you?" "So what?" The master and madam only brought her back because Larry refused to marry that vegetable billionaire. Poor Miss Stephanie, born a Justin but returning as a sacrificial pawn. The driver shifted uncomfortably. "Miss, perhaps we should." "Drive to the main gate," Stephanie said quietly. "But Master Larry said." "I said, drive to the main gate." Her voice carried no anger, no emotion at all. Yet something in those words made the driver's hands tremble on the wheel. He obeyed. As the car approached, the massive wrought iron gate, each panel worth more than most houses, began to shudder. The electronic mechanism sparked once, twice. Then, with a groan that echoed across the courtyard, the entire structure collapsed inward, crashing onto the pristine driveway in a shower of twisted metal and shattered stone pillars. Servants screamed. Larry stumbled backward, his face draining of color. Stephanie stepped from the car, her cheap canvas shoes crunching on debris. The wind caught her hair, and for just a moment, something ancient flickered in her eyes, something that made the very air feel heavy, suffocating. "My apologies," she said, her voice carrying across the stunned silence. "I seem to have broken your gate." From the mansion's entrance, her mother appeared, diamond necklace glittering. "Stephanie? What have you done?" "I came home, Mother." Stephanie's lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. "Isn't that what you wanted?" Larry found his voice, though it cracked slightly. You destroyed our gate. Do you have any idea how much that cost?" "I'll add it to your tab." Stephanie walked forward, glass crunching beneath her feet. "I hear you need me to marry someone." "A dying billionaire, is it?" "Consider the gate my consultation fee." Her father rushed out, face purple with rage. "You insolent girl. We bring you home after all these years, and this is how you—" $10 billion. The courtyard fell silent. "I'm sorry, what?" her father sputtered. Stephanie met his eyes with the calm of someone who had stared down far more terrifying things than angry parents. $10 billion, and I'll marry your comatose billionaire. I'll play the dutiful daughter. I'll save your precious Larry from his inconvenient engagement." She tilted her head. "Or would you prefer I leave? I'm sure that gate isn't the only thing around here that might, accidentally, break." Thunder rumbled overhead, though the sky had been clear moments before. Larry's face twisted with barely concealed fury, but their mother grabbed their father's arm. "Harold, perhaps we should discuss this inside." $10 billion, Stephanie repeated, turning toward the mansion. "You have until tonight to decide. After all." She glanced back over her shoulder, and for just an instant, her eyes seemed to glow with an otherworldly light. "I have a feeling your billionaire doesn't have much time left. And neither does anyone else who stands in my way." She walked through the debris of the gate she destroyed, leaving her family frozen in shock and fear. Because Stephanie Justin had returned. And the world had no idea what was coming. The lost daughter was home. But she was no helpless orphan. She was something far, far more dangerous. Before we get deep into the story, let me know in the comments section where you are watching from. Hit subscribe and like if you are ready to enjoy the story, because I have more beautiful and interesting stories and you would not want to miss it for anything. The Justin family's private study smelled of old money and older lies. Stephanie sat in the stiff back chair they'd offered her, watching her parents exchange nervous glances across the mahogany desk. Larry lounged against the bookshelf, arms crossed, that perpetual smirk playing at his lips. 10 billion is excessive, her father began, fingers drumming against the leather desk pad. So is asking your biological daughter to marry a dying man so your adopted son can avoid inconvenience, Stephanie replied evenly. I'd say we're even. Her mother flinched. Stephanie, that's not fair. We're a family. Are we? Stephanie's gaze swept the room, landing on the photographs covering every surface. Larry's graduation. Larry's awards. Larry's smile beaming from frame after frame. Not a single picture included her. Because from where I'm sitting, you're a family. I'm just the girl who shares your DNA. You ungrateful little. Larry pushed off the bookshelf, but their father raised a hand. Enough. Harold Justin pulled out a leather folder, sliding it across the desk. The Whitmore family's only heir, Sebastian Whitmore, has been in a coma for 3 months. The doctors give him a week at most. His grandmother, Madeline Whitmore, is desperate for him to fulfill his father's dying wish, to marry before passing on. How touching, Stephanie said without emotion. The Whitmore fortune is the 3rd largest in the country, her mother added, leaning forward with practiced sympathy. If you marry him, even for a week, you'll be set for life. We'll transfer the 10 billion immediately. And when he dies? Larry laughed. Then you're a very rich widow. Though knowing you, you'll probably blow it all within a year. Stephanie opened the folder. The photograph inside showed a man in his early 30s, sharp-featured and aristocratic even in unconsciousness. Tubes and wires obscured most of his face, but there was something about him, a familiar energy that made her fingers tingle against the paper. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Karmic debt. She could feel it humming through the photograph, threads of fate binding her to this stranger in ways her family couldn't possibly understand. There's a reason you came back to us now, she murmured, more to herself than them. After all these years. What was that? Her father asked. Stephanie closed the folder decisively. I'll do it. Transfer the money tonight. I'll marry your dying billionaire tomorrow. Relief flooded her mother's face. Oh, Stephanie, thank you. You're saving our family. I'm saving no one. Stephanie stood, smoothing her plain dress. I'm closing an account. There's a difference. She walked toward the door, but Larry's voice stopped her. You know what's funny? You actually think you matter now. But the moment that vegetable dies, you'll go right back to being nothing. Less than nothing. Stephanie paused at the threshold, not turning around. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees, and the lights flickered ominously. Larry, she said softly, I'd be very careful about underestimating what I am. You might not survive the revelation. She left them in the suddenly freezing study, the door clicking shut with a finality that sounded like a promise. Or a threat. The engagement dinner was a spectacle of calculated cruelty. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across tables laden with delicacies Stephanie had never tasted, while women dripping in diamonds whispered behind jeweled fans. The Justin family had spared no expense in announcing their charitable gesture, taking in their lost daughter and marrying her off to save the prestigious Whitmore line. Stephanie sat at the far end of the main table in her simple cotton dress, a deliberate contrast to the sea of silk and satin surrounding her. She'd been introduced as our daughter who recently returned to us, but the pitying glances and barely concealed sneers told her exactly how that was being interpreted. Elena Rothschild, Larry's fiancée and the daughter of Old Money, held court at the table's center. Her throat dripped with a necklace that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime, blood rubies set in platinum, each stone the size of a thumbnail. "It must be so overwhelming for you," Elena cooed, her voice honey-sweet and laced with venom. "Coming from, wherever you've been, into all this." She gestured vaguely at the opulence surrounding them. "Do you even know which fork to use?" Laughter rippled through the nearby guests. Stephanie took a sip of water, her expression unchanging. "I manage." "How modest." Elena leaned forward, her rubies catching the light. "You know, when I heard Larry's family was forcing their biological daughter to marry a corpse, I thought it was a joke. But here you are." She placed a manicured hand over her heart in mock sympathy. "Sacrificing yourself so the rest of us don't have to. How noble." More laughter. Larry smiled behind his wine glass, enjoying the show. "Tell me," Elena continued, emboldened, "what does one wear to marry a vegetable? I assume the ceremony will be brief. After all, the groom won't be able to object." She paused for effect. Or consent, for that matter. The table erupted in titters and gasps. Even Stephanie's mother looked away, unwilling to defend her. Stephanie set down her glass with deliberate care. "Elena." Something in the way she said the name made the laughter die abruptly. "You have a lovely necklace," Stephanie observed, her gaze finally lifting to meet Elena's. "Family heirloom?" Elena's hand flew to her throat protectively. 5 generations. Worth more than my life?" Stephanie smiled, and it was a terrible thing to witness. "Probably true." She raised her hand slightly, fingers moving in a gesture so subtle it might have been mistaken for adjusting her napkin. The air in the room grew thick, oppressive. Elena's eyes widened. "What are you?" The first ruby cracked with a sound like breaking ice. Then another. Then another. The platinum setting began to warp, metal groaning as if under impossible pressure. Elena clawed at the necklace, but before she could remove it, the entire piece shattered, gemstones exploding into glittering powder, metal dissolving like sugar in rain. Elena screamed, stumbling backward. Where the necklace had been, her skin was unmarked, but the priceless heirloom was gone, reduced to glittering dust on her designer gown. The room fell into stunned silence. Stephanie took another sip of water. "How clumsy of you," she said mildly. "You should be more careful with family treasures. They're so fragile." She stood, smoothing her cheap dress. "If you'll excuse me, I have a wedding to prepare for." As she walked out, every guest shrank back from her path, and even Larry's face had gone pale. Because in that moment, they'd all felt it, the weight of something ancient and powerful barely contained beneath human skin. Stephanie Justin was no sacrificial lamb. She was the wolf in their midst. And she was done being underestimated. The Sterling auction house buzzed with the city's elite, all gathered for what was being called the sale of the decade. Stephanie attended reluctantly, dragged along by her mother who insisted the future Mrs. Whitmore needed to be seen in proper society before the wedding. "Just sit quietly and don't embarrass us," her mother hissed, settling into their front row seats. Larry and Elena occupied the adjacent box, Elena's neck conspicuously bare of jewelry, her eyes burning with barely concealed hatred. The auctioneer, a distinguished man named Victor Chen, stepped to the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, our final item tonight, Lot 47. A recently discovered painting attributed to the legendary master Xin of the Ming Dynasty. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as assistants unveiled a landscape scroll. Mountains shrouded in mist, a solitary temple, brushstrokes that seemed to breathe with life. However, Victor continued, his tone apologetic, our experts have determined this to be an exceptionally skilled forgery. As such, we're offering it at a reserve price of merely $50,000 for collectors interested in historical reproductions. A waste of wall space, someone muttered behind Stephanie. The brushwork is too perfect, another expert declared loudly. Master Xin was known for his deliberate imperfections. This is clearly a modern fake trying too hard. Stephanie's eyes had locked onto the scroll the moment it appeared. She could feel it, the pulse of genuine qi embedded in every stroke, the signature spiritual resonance that no forger could replicate. This wasn't a fake. This was one of Master Xin's lost masterworks, one of only 3 he'd created during his final enlightenment. 50,000, a hesitant voice called. 50,000 once, twice. $10 million. The auction house fell silent. Every head turned toward Stephanie, who had raised her paddle with calm certainty. Her mother gasped. Stephanie, what are you? That's a fake. Don't humiliate us. 10 million for a confirmed forgery? Victor Chen looked bewildered. Miss, perhaps you didn't hear, our experts have authenticated this as. Your experts are blind fools. Stephanie stood, her voice carrying through the stunned silence. That is Master Xin's Temple of Eternal Mist, one of 3 paintings he created in the final month before his ascension. It was lost in 1644 during the fall of the Ming Dynasty. A renowned art historian in the third row scoffed. Ridiculous. I've studied Master Xin for 30 years. The brushwork lacks his characteristic. The brushwork transcends his earlier style because he painted it after achieving enlightenment, Stephanie interrupted, walking toward the podium. Look at the temple's foundation. See those 3 stones? Each one contains a hidden seal, characters so small they're invisible to the naked eye. She gestured, and somehow everyone in the room felt compelled to look closer. The seals read, Heaven, Earth, and Man, Stephanie continued. Master Xin only used this triple seal on works painted after his spiritual awakening. Your experts never looked beyond the surface. Victor Chen's hands trembled as he produced a magnifying device. Minutes passed in electric silence. Finally, he looked up, face pale. She's correct. The seals are there. My God, this is genuine. Pandemonium erupted. The painting's value had just increased 1,000-fold. Larry shot to his feet. This is absurd. She's been living in poverty for 20 years, how could she possibly? 10 million, Stephanie repeated calmly. Do I hear higher? No one dared bid against her. The room had felt the weight of her knowledge, the certainty that bordered on supernatural awareness. Sold, Victor whispered, to Miss Stephanie Justin. As Stephanie returned to her seat, her mother stared at her as if seeing a stranger. Larry's face had gone purple with rage, while Elena looked ready to faint. Who are you? Her mother finally breathed. Stephanie smiled that terrible smile again. Someone you should never have underestimated, Mother. But you're about to find that out. The Whitmore estate loomed like a Gothic cathedral, all dark stone and stained glass windows that caught the dying light. Stephanie arrived the day before her wedding to meet her soon-to-be husband's family, her $10 billion painting tucked under her arm in a simple cloth wrapping. Madeline Whitmore, the family matriarch, waited in the grand hall, a woman in her 70s with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen empires rise and fall. Despite her age, she carried herself with military precision, every inch the general who'd built the Whitmore fortune into legend. "So you're the girl they're paying to marry my grandson," Madeline said, her voice sharp as cut glass. $10 billion for a week of pretending to be a wife. Quite the bargain. "I prefer to think of it as settling accounts," Stephanie replied evenly. "Honest, at least." "I respect that." Madeline gestured to a servant. "Take her to Sebastian's room. Let her see what she's agreed to." But before the servant could move, Madeline's face contorted. Her hand flew to her chest, and the color drained from her skin like water from a broken vessel. "Grandmother!" A young woman in a designer suit rushed forward as Madeline collapsed. "Call Dr. Morrison." "Now!" someone shouted. Chaos erupted. Servants scattered. The family physician arrived within minutes, his medical bag already open. He worked frantically, checking vitals, administering medication, barking orders at nurses who'd materialized from nowhere. "Her heart rate is plummeting," Dr. Morrison announced, sweat beading his forehead. "We need to get her to the hospital immediately." "There's no time," another doctor interjected, arriving with a portable EKG. "Look at these readings. This isn't a normal cardiac event. I've never seen anything like this." Stephanie watched from the edge of the commotion, her eyes tracking something no one else could see. Dark tendrils of spiritual energy coiled around Madeline's chest, choking the life from her. This wasn't a heart attack. This was a karmic backlash, decades of spiritual debt collecting all at once. "She's coding." Dr. Morrison grabbed the defibrillator. "Clear." Madeline's body convulsed, but the monitor remained flat. Again. "Clear." "Nothing." "Time of death." "Move aside." Stephanie's voice cut through the despair like a blade. Dr. Morrison looked up, face haggard. "Miss, this isn't the time for." "I said move." The temperature plummeted. The lights flickered. And something in Stephanie's tone made every person in the room step back instinctively. She knelt beside Madeline, pulling a cloth bundle from her bag. Inside were needles, not modern acupuncture needles, but ancient implements made of jade and silver, inscribed with characters that seemed to writhe in the dim light. "What are you doing?" the young woman demanded. "You can't just." Stephanie's fingers moved with impossible precision, placing needles at points that existed between the physical and spiritual realms. Ghost points, locations known only to masters of the mystic sect, where the soul's energy could be directly manipulated. The needles began to glow with pale blue light. "This is insane," Dr. Morrison breathed, but he couldn't look away. Stephanie placed the final needle at the crown of Madeline's head and spoke words in a language older than the estate's stones. The dark tendrils recoiled, shrieking soundlessly as they dissolved. The needles pulsed brighter, and suddenly Madeline gasped, a deep, shuddering breath that filled the room with impossible relief. The EKG machine erupted with steady beeps. Color flooded back into the matriarch's face. Madeline's eyes opened, focusing immediately on Stephanie with startling clarity. "You," she whispered. "You're not just some girl they hired." Stephanie removed the needles one by one, each vanishing into her cloth as if they'd never existed. "No," she agreed quietly. "I'm not." "What are you?" Stephanie stood, meeting the old woman's gaze with something that might have been respect. "Someone who pays her debts, Matriarch Whitmore. And someone who collects them." Madeline's lips curved into a smile fierce enough to match Stephanie's own. "Then perhaps my grandson is luckier than I thought." The chapel within the Whitmore estate had been built for celebrations, but today it felt like a mausoleum. Gray morning light filtered through stained glass windows, casting fractured colors across empty pews. No guests had been invited, just immediate family, a priest who looked profoundly uncomfortable, and a groom who hadn't opened his eyes in 3 months. Sebastian Whitmore lay on a modified hospital bed wheeled before the altar, tubes and monitors reduced to the bare minimum for the ceremony. Even unconscious, he possessed a strange magnetism, sharp features, dark hair, and a presence that suggested he'd been formidable before fate struck him down. Stephanie stood beside him in a simple white dress purchased that morning. No veil, no flowers, no pretense of romance. Across from her, Madeline Whitmore watched with calculating eyes, still pale from yesterday's brush with death but unbowed. The Justin family occupied the rear pews like hostile spectators at an execution. Larry's face was a mask of barely suppressed glee, while Elena whispered poison into his ear. Stephanie's parents looked anywhere but at their daughter, as if her very presence embarrassed them. "Dearly beloved," the priest began, his voice cracking, "we are gathered here today to..." A sound like grinding metal shrieked through the chapel. The stained glass windows rattled in their frames. Several candles guttered and died, though there was no wind. What was that? Elena clutched Larry's arm. Stephanie's eyes narrowed. She'd felt it the moment she entered the estate yesterday, a wrongness that clung to the walls like mold, a spiritual rot that went deeper than Madeline's karmic debt. Now, standing at the altar, she could see it clearly. Dark energy coiled through the chapel's foundations like serpents, feeding on something, growing stronger. A curse. Ancient and deliberate. "Continue," Madeline commanded the priest, her voice steady despite the unnatural chill settling over the room. The priest swallowed hard. "Do you, Stephanie Justin, take Sebastian Whitmore to be your lawfully wedded husband, in sickness and in..." "She takes a vegetable as a husband." Larry's voice rang out from the back. "This is a farce. She's marrying a corpse for money." "Larry!" Stephanie's mother hissed, but the damage was done. The dark energy pulsed, feeding on the cruelty, the contempt, the gathered resentment. Stephanie felt it reaching toward Sebastian, hungry tendrils seeking to finish what they'd started. "I do," she said firmly, cutting through the chaos. Her voice carried power that made the shadows recoil. "I take Sebastian Whitmore as my husband, and I claim him under my protection." The temperature dropped so sharply that frost formed on the pews. Larry's laughter died in his throat. "Do you?" The priest looked at Sebastian's unconscious form helplessly. "He does," Madeline declared. "By proxy of his living will." The priest produced the rings with trembling hands. Stephanie slid the band onto Sebastian's finger, and as she did, she channeled a thread of her own energy into him, a barrier against the darkness that sought to consume him. His fingers twitched. It was barely perceptible, but Stephanie felt it, a response, a recognition. Deep within his comatose state, something in Sebastian Whitmore had recognized her touch. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the priest said hurriedly. "You may, well, that is." "The ceremony is concluded," Madeline announced, rising from her seat. "Stephanie, you'll move into the East Wing tonight. Sebastian's room is prepared for you both." "Both?" Elena's voice was shrill. "She's going to sleep in the same room as..." "She's his wife," Madeline said coldly. "And after what she did for me yesterday, she's earned her place in this house." Her eyes swept over the Justin family. "Which is more than I can say for those who came here to mock." Stephanie approached Sebastian's bed, placing her hand over his. The curse writhed beneath the estate, angry at being thwarted, but it could not touch him now. Not while she stood guard. "Hello, husband," she murmured, too softly for others to hear. "Let's see what's keeping you trapped, shall we?" Behind her, Larry's face had gone purple with rage. He exchanged a look with Elena that promised violence. But Stephanie felt it all, their hatred, their plotting, the curse lurking in the foundations, and the strange pull of fate that had drawn her to this dying man. The game had begun in earnest. And she would not lose. The east wing of the Whitmore estate had been closed for decades, Madeline explained as she led Stephanie through corridors thick with dust and memories. Sebastian's room occupied the corner, a sprawling suite with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking gardens gone wild with neglect. He loved this view, Madeline said, her voice cracking for the first time since Stephanie had met her. Even as a child, he'd spend hours watching the birds. Now Sebastian lay in a hospital bed surrounded by machines, his chest rising and falling with mechanical precision. The medical staff had converted half the suite into a private intensive care unit, complete with monitoring equipment that beeped softly in the darkness. "I'll leave you to settle in," Madeline said. "Though I suspect you won't be settling much." Stephanie met her knowing gaze. "The curse? So you felt it too?" Madeline's expression hardened. "I thought I was imagining things in my old age. But when you appeared, when I nearly died..." She trailed off. "Someone wants this family destroyed." "Someone close," Stephanie agreed. "The curse is fed regularly. Maintained. It didn't just happen, it's been growing for years." After Madeline left, Stephanie began her work. She moved through the rooms methodically, her hands tracing patterns in the air that left faint trails of light. With each gesture, she pulled at the threads of negative energy, unraveling the curse layer by careful layer. In Sebastian's study, she found the densest concentration, a knot of malevolent energy coiled behind his desk like a nest of vipers. As she worked to dissolve it, something fell from a hidden compartment in the wall, a leather journal, its pages filled with Sebastian's angular handwriting. The entries were dated up until the day before his collapse. Father's merger with the Chen Corporation finalized today. Larry James attended as their representative. Strange man, too eager to please. Mother doesn't trust him, but father insists he's essential to the deal. Stephanie flipped forward. "Feeling ill lately?" "Headaches, fatigue. Doctors find nothing wrong. Larry brought me tea today, said it was a family recipe from the Justins. Kind of him, though something about his smile unsettles me. Further still. The dreams are getting worse. Shadow figures at the foot of my bed. Mother says I'm working too hard, but this feels different. Wrong." Larry visited again. "More tea. I should stop accepting it, but refusing seems rude." The final entry was barely legible, written in a shaking hand. "Can't think straight. Everything's spinning. Larry was here when I collapsed. The last thing I remember, his face. He was smiling." Stephanie's fingers tightened on the journal. Larry. Her adopted brother had done this. But why? What connection could he possibly have to? A sound made her turn. Sebastian's monitor had changed pitch, the steady beeping accelerating slightly. She moved to his bedside and placed her palm against his forehead, sending a pulse of diagnostic energy through his system. What she found made her blood run cold. Poison. Not in his blood anymore, the doctors had inadvertently flushed most of it during their treatments. But residue remained in his neural pathways, crystallized into his brain tissue. A slow-acting toxin designed to look like natural illness, combined with spiritual corruption to ensure he never woke. Clever, Stephanie murmured. Medical science finds nothing conclusive. Spiritual masters would assume simple karma. But together. She studied Sebastian's still face. Someone taught Larry how to walk between worlds. Someone with real knowledge. She pulled out her jade needles, but before she could begin treatment, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Leave the Whitmore estate tonight, or Sebastian dies. This is your only warning. A friend. Stephanie's lips curved into that dangerous smile. She typed back. Come try to kill him. I'll be waiting. His wife. She set the phone aside and began placing needles at Sebastian's ghost points, each one glowing with protective energy. Someone made a terrible mistake, she told her unconscious husband. They involved my family in their schemes. And now they've made you my responsibility. The needles pulsed brighter. I always collect my debts, Sebastian Whitmore. And I always protect what's mine. Outside, storm clouds gathered despite the clear forecast. The lion's den had a new resident. And she had teeth sharper than theirs. The attack came at 3 in the morning, when even the night staff had retreated to distant corners of the estate. Stephanie sat in meditation beside Sebastian's bed, her consciousness expanded through the building's corridors like invisible threads. She felt the intruder the moment they breached the East Wing's entrance, familiar energy, perfumed and poisonous. Elena. Stephanie didn't move, didn't open her eyes. She simply waited, tracking Elena's progress through the darkened halls. The woman moved with practiced silence, clearly not her first nocturnal visit. In her hand, she carried a syringe filled with liquid that reeked of spiritual corruption even from a distance. The door to Sebastian's room opened with barely a whisper. Elena slipped inside, her face illuminated by the monitor's pale glow. She looked almost beautiful in the darkness, like a vengeful angel come to deliver judgment. I gave you a chance to leave, Elena whispered, approaching Sebastian's foreline. But you just had to play the hero, didn't you? Saving the old woman, moving in here like you belong. She uncapped the syringe. This is your fault, really. If you'd just taken your money and disappeared. I'm curious, Stephanie said calmly, still not opening her eyes. Is it Larry's baby you're protecting, or someone else's? Elena spun around, the syringe clattering to the floor. You're supposed to be asleep? Unaware? Stephanie's eyes opened, and they glowed with that otherworldly light that made Elena stumble backward. I've known you were coming since you left your apartment. I felt your intent like rot on the wind. You're insane, Elena hissed, fumbling for the door handle. It wouldn't turn. The door seems to be stuck, Stephanie observed mildly. She gestured toward Sebastian's bed, where the monitors had begun to emit a long, continuous tone. Oh dear. It seems your poison worked after all. My husband is dead. Elena's face went white as the flatline sound filled the room. No, that's not, I didn't. You didn't inject him? Stephanie tilted her head. Strange. Then how did he die at the exact moment you entered his room with a lethal dose? She stood, and the temperature plummeted. The evidence is quite damning, Elena. Your fingerprints on the syringe, your perfume in the room, security footage of you breaking in. You set me up. I simply let you act according to your nature. Stephanie walked to the window, her back to Elena. Now, I wonder what Sebastian's ghost thinks about the woman who murdered him. The lights went out completely. In the darkness, a figure began to rise from the bed, Sebastian's form, but wrong somehow, translucent and wreathed in cold mist. His eyes opened, glowing with spectral light, and fixed on Elena with inhuman intensity. Elena screamed. He was innocent, the figure spoke with Sebastian's voice layered over something ancient and terrible. I did nothing to you. Why? Stay away from me. Elena clawed at the door, fingernails breaking against the wood. This isn't real, this isn't. The ghost drifted closer, reaching out with hands that passed through solid matter. Tell me why you wanted me dead. Tell me who helped you. It was Larry. Larry planned everything. Elena's words tumbled out in a panicked rush. He said the Whitmore fortune would pass to your grandmother, then to distant relatives, then eventually the Justins could claim it through some legal loophole. He needed you dead before you could marry, before you could have children. The poison, the curse, it was all Larry. And the one who taught him, the ghost pressed closer, its face inches from Elena's. Who gave him the knowledge to walk between worlds? I don't know. Some master he met years ago, before the Justins adopted him. Please, please let me go, I'll testify, I'll tell everyone. The lights blazed back to life. Sebastian lay in his bed exactly as before, monitors beeping steadily. No ghost, no spectral form. Just an unconscious man and a woman who'd confessed to conspiracy and attempted murder. Stephanie stood by the window, phone in hand, its screen showing a recording in progress. Thank you, Elena. That was very thorough. Elena stared at Sebastian's still form, then at Stephanie, her mind fracturing as it tried to reconcile what she'd seen. But you were. An illusion, Stephanie said simply. A reflection of your guilt made manifest. Humans are so easy to manipulate when they're drowning in their own conscience. She opened the door with a casual gesture. It had never been locked. Run along now. I'll be forwarding this recording to Matriarch Whitmore in the morning, along with the syringe you so kindly brought as evidence. Stephanie's smile was glacial. I suggest you use the remaining hours to say goodbye to your freedom. And to Larry. I imagine he'll need support when the authorities come calling. Elena fled, her sobs echoing through the corridors. Stephanie locked the door behind her, properly this time, and returned to Sebastian's bedside. She placed her hand over his, feeling the steady pulse of life beneath her palm. One down, she murmured. But the real puppet master is still out there, husband. The one who taught Larry these arts. Her eyes narrowed. And I will find them. I promise you that. Sebastian's fingers twitched again beneath hers, stronger this time. Somewhere in the darkness of his coma, perhaps he heard her. Perhaps he understood. The hunt had begun. Morning broke over the Whitmore estate with crystalline clarity, as if the night's darkness had been banished by something more than sunrise. Stephanie had worked through the remaining hours, her jade needles arranged in intricate patterns around Sebastian's body, each one pulsing with purifying light that drove the last traces of poison from his system. At 7 o'clock, Madeline Whitmore entered the room with her usual military precision, flanked by the family physician and 3 of the estate's board members. She stopped dead at the threshold. Sebastian's eyes were open. Grandmother, he said, his voice rough from months of disuse but unmistakably conscious. I hear I got married while I was asleep. How terribly rude of me to miss my own wedding. The teacup slipped from Madeline's hands, shattering on the marble floor. Sebastian? My God, Sebastian. Dr. Morrison rushed forward, his medical bag forgotten as he checked vitals with shaking hands. This is impossible. 3 months comatose, multiple organ systems failing, brain activity minimal, you should be dead? Sebastian's gaze shifted to Stephanie, who sat calmly in the corner, her needles already packed away. I would be, if not for my wife. She's been fighting for me all night. I could feel it, even in the darkness. You were conscious? Dr. Morrison looked bewildered. But the scans showed. Trapped, Sebastian corrected, sitting up slowly despite the doctor's protests. Imprisoned in my own mind by something that wasn't medical. His eyes hardened. By someone who wanted me dead. The room fell silent. "I think it's time we had a family meeting," Stephanie said quietly, standing. "There are some people who need to hear what happened last night." Within the hour, the Whitmore Estates Grand Hall was filled to capacity. The board of directors occupied the front rows, flanked by lawyers and executives. The Justin family had been summoned urgently, Stephanie's parents looking confused, Larry wearing that familiar smirk, though his eyes betrayed nervousness. Elena was notably absent. Madeline stood at the center of the room like a general addressing troops. "Many of you have heard that my grandson has awakened. What you don't know is why he fell ill in the first place, or who was responsible." She turned to Stephanie. "Mrs. Whitmore, if you would." Stephanie stepped forward, and the weight of her presence made even the most arrogant board members shift uncomfortably. She connected her phone to the room's display system. "Last night, Elena Rothschild broke into my husband's room with intent to deliver a lethal dose of poison," Stephanie began. "Fortunately, I was waiting for her. What follows is her full confession." She pressed play. Elena's voice filled the hall, high and panicked, detailing everything: Larry's plan to claim the Whitmore fortune, the poison administered over weeks disguised as tea, the spiritual curse that kept Sebastian trapped, the mysterious master who'd taught Larry the forbidden arts. Larry shot to his feet. "This is a fabrication. That recording could be." "There's also security footage," Stephanie interrupted, displaying video of Elena entering the East Wing at 3 a.m., syringe in hand. And the physical evidence, the syringe itself, covered in her fingerprints, containing a compound that matches the residue found in Sebastian's system. "Larry." Their mother's voice was barely a whisper. "Tell me this isn't true." But Larry's face had gone ashen, his carefully constructed mask crumbling. "You don't understand. I built the Justin family's connections to the Whitmores. I facilitated their deals, secured their trust. And for what? So they could hand everything to him?" He pointed at Sebastian with shaking hands. "I deserve that fortune. I earned it." "You earned nothing," Sebastian said coldly, standing now despite his weakness. "You poisoned me. You cursed my family. You tried to destroy us for greed. Where is Elena?" Madeline demanded. "In custody," a new voice announced. Detective Chen entered from the back, badge held high. "She turned herself in at 4 this morning, fully cooperating." "Mr. Larry James, you're under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy, and corporate espionage." Larry tried to run, but security guards blocked every exit. As the detective read his rights, he turned to Stephanie with pure hatred burning in his eyes. "You think you've won?" he spat. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. The master who taught me, they're coming for you. They know what you are now, and they don't forgive interference." "Good," Stephanie said softly, and the temperature dropped. "I was hoping they'd come. I have questions about who gave trash like you access to sacred arts." As guards dragged Larry away, Stephanie's father finally found his voice. "Stephanie, we didn't know if we'd realized." "You threw me away without knowing anything about me," Stephanie interrupted. "You favored him because he was convenient, polished, useful. You never asked where I'd been or what I'd become." Her gaze swept over both parents. The Justin family made their choice years ago. Live with it. She turned back to Madeline and Sebastian. "Matriarch Whitmore, my karmic debt to your family is paid. Sebastian is healed, the curse is broken, and your enemies are exposed." She moved toward the door. "I'll have divorce papers drawn up by the end of the week." "Wait." Sebastian's voice stopped her. He crossed the room with surprising strength, standing before her with something like wonder in his eyes. "You saved my life. Fought battles I couldn't fight. Stood guard while I was helpless. He took her hand. And you think I'm letting you walk away? Our marriage was a transaction, Stephanie said, though her voice had softened slightly. It was. Sebastian smiled, and it transformed his face. But somewhere between death and rebirth, I'd like to think it became something more. At least, I'd like the chance to find out. Madeline cleared her throat. The board has voted. Stephanie Whitmore, and yes, you'll keep that name, is hereby appointed as special advisor to the Whitmore Corporation with full access and authority. Her eyes glittered. We don't let warriors like you escape, girl. Not when there are enemies still lurking. Stephanie looked between them, this strange new family who saw her not as a burden but as an asset, not as disposable but as invaluable. Something unfamiliar stirred in her chest. Perhaps it was the faint echo of the human emotions she'd thought long dead. 1 month, she finally said. I'll stay 1 month. We'll see if this marriage is worth keeping. Sebastian's smile widened. I'll take it. As the room erupted in conversation and her former family slipped away in disgrace, Stephanie felt the threads of fate shifting around her. The game wasn't over. Larry's master was still out there, watching, waiting. But for the first time in 20 years, Stephanie wasn't alone. And that changed everything. The photograph appeared on every major news outlet within 24 hours. Sebastian Whitmore, miraculously recovered from his months-long coma, standing in the Whitmore estate's rose garden with his wife beside him. His arm wrapped protectively around her waist, while she held the priceless Mastershon painting that had already become legendary in art circles. The headline read, "The Widow Who Conquered Death, Stephanie Whitmore's Impossible Rise." Within hours, the story had gone viral. Social media exploded with speculation, admiration, and disbelief. The girl who'd been forced to marry a dying man had not only saved his life but exposed a conspiracy, inherited a position of unprecedented power, and somehow managed to look utterly unbothered by all of it. $10 billion to marry a vegetable, one post read, shared hundreds of thousands of times. She turned around and bought priceless art, saved his grandmother's life, healed him with mysterious techniques, and exposed the real villain. Main character energy at maximum level. The Justin family's fall was equally spectacular. Corporate partnerships dissolved overnight as companies scrambled to distance themselves from the scandal. Their stock plummeted. Investors fled. Within a week, the once mighty Justin empire was teetering on bankruptcy. Stephanie watched it all unfold from Sebastian's study, now partly hers, with the detached interest of someone observing distant storms. Her phone buzzed constantly with interview requests, partnership offers, and invitations to exclusive events. She ignored them all. "You're officially more famous than me," Sebastian observed, setting down his tablet. He'd regained his strength remarkably fast, though he still tired easily. The board is fielding dozens of requests for appearances. Everyone wants to meet the mystic healer of the Whitmore estate. Foolish, Stephanie murmured. Fame attracts attention. Attention attracts enemies. Speaking of which, Madeline entered without knocking, her face grim. She placed a cream-colored envelope on the desk. This arrived by private courier. No return address, but the seal. She pointed to the wax emblem, a serpent devouring its own tail, inscribed with characters in an ancient dialect. Stephanie's expression didn't change, but Sebastian felt the air grow heavy. "You recognize it," he said. "The Eternal Serpent Sect." Stephanie opened the envelope with deliberate care. Inside was a single card, written in elegant calligraphy. "Little master of the mystic sect, you have interfered where you should not have. The Justin boy was our investment, his success our design. You have cost us years of cultivation and considerable resources. We demand recompense. Present yourself at the Black Lotus Temple on the night of the new moon, or watch everyone you've claimed to protect suffer as your husband did. Elder Shin. A threat, Madeline observed coldly. An invitation, Stephanie corrected, a dangerous smile playing at her lips. They're finally showing themselves. You're not seriously considering going? Sebastian stood, his protective instincts overriding his weakened state. This is obviously a trap. Of course it's a trap. Stephanie turned to face him, and for the first time, he saw something ancient and powerful flickering behind her eyes, the true depth of what she'd been hiding. But they made a critical error. They assumed I was protecting you because I'm weak, sentimental, human. She held up the card, and it burst into flames that consumed the paper but left her fingers untouched. I'm protecting you because you're mine. And I don't forgive debts unpaid. The flames cast eerie shadows across her face. 20 years ago, the mystic sect sent me into the world to understand humanity, to cultivate compassion, to learn what it meant to be mortal. Her voice carried harmonics that made the windows vibrate. The Justin family was supposed to be that lesson, a chance to experience family, belonging, love. But they rejected you, Sebastian said quietly. They threw me away like garbage. Let me believe I was worthless, unwanted, broken. The flames in her hand grew brighter. So I learned different lessons. I learned that humans are cruel. That power is the only language they respect. That kindness is mistaken for weakness. She extinguished the flames with a gesture. The Eternal Serpent sect trained Larry to be their puppet in the corporate world, to accumulate wealth and influence they could harvest. They gave him just enough power to be dangerous, just enough knowledge to be useful. Her eyes met Sebastian's. They made him exactly what he became, a monster in human skin. And now they want you to pay for ruining their investment, Madeline concluded. No. Stephanie's smile widened, terrible and beautiful. Now they're going to pay for creating him in the first place. For corrupting sacred arts. For weaponizing mysticism for greed. She walked to the window, looking out over the city that had spent the past week obsessing over her story. Schedule a press conference for tomorrow evening, she told Madeline. If I'm going to be famous anyway, I might as well use it. What are you planning? Sebastian asked. The Eternal Serpent sect thrives in shadows, operates through proxies, hides behind legitimate businesses. Stephanie turned back to them. So I'm going to drag them into the light. Every company they control, every politician they've bought, every dark deed they've committed, I'm going to expose all of it. That's suicide, Madeline breathed. If they're as powerful as you suggest. They are. Stephanie's expression hardened. But power built on secrets is fragile. And I'm very good at breaking fragile things. The next evening, every major network carried the press conference live. Stephanie stood at the podium in a simple black suit, the picture of composed authority, while Sebastian and Madeline flanked her. Good evening, she began, her voice carrying to millions of viewers. My name is Stephanie Whitmore, and I have a story to tell you about corruption, conspiracy, and a shadow organization that has been manipulating your world for decades. For the next hour, she methodically destroyed the Eternal Serpent sect. She presented documents, recordings, financial records, evidence she'd been gathering since the moment she recognized their handiwork in Larry's techniques. She named names, exposed connections, revealed the web of influence they'd woven through corporations, governments, and institutions. By the time she finished, the internet was ablaze. Law enforcement in 3 countries had already begun investigations. The sect's legitimate fronts were being raided. Their carefully constructed empire was collapsing in real time. To Elder Shin and the Eternal Serpent sect, Stephanie concluded, looking directly into the camera, "You wanted recompense? You wanted me to present myself? Here I am. The whole world is watching now. Come and collect your debt." She smiled that smile that had terrified everyone who'd seen it. "If you dare." The broadcast ended. Within minutes, Stephanie's phone exploded with notifications. Support poured in from unexpected quarters, other mystical sects who'd suffered under the Serpent's corruption, legitimate practitioners who'd been discredited by their schemes, victims who'd never understood what had been done to them. "You've started a war," Sebastian said quietly as they returned to the estate. "No," Stephanie corrected, taking his hand. "I'm finishing one that began when they decided sacred knowledge was a commodity to exploit." She looked at him, and her expression softened slightly. "But I won't ask you to fight it with me. This isn't your world." Sebastian laughed, a real laugh, full of genuine mirth. "You saved my life, exposed my would-be murderer, gave my grandmother years she wouldn't have had, and somehow made me fall in love with you in the process." He pulled her closer. "You're not getting rid of me that easily, wife." "Love?" Stephanie's eyebrow arched. "That's a strong claim for someone who's been conscious for only a week." "I had months to listen to you while I was trapped in darkness," Sebastian said seriously. "I heard every word you spoke to me. Every promise you made. Every time you stood guard." His hand cupped her face. "I knew what you were before I opened my eyes." For the first time since returning to the Justin family, Stephanie felt something crack in the walls she'd built around herself, the defenses that had kept her from feeling, from caring, from being anything but the weapon the mystic sect had trained her to be. 1 month, she reminded him, but her voice had lost its edge. 1 month, he agreed. And then another. And another. He smiled. "I'm patient. I waited 3 months in a coma. I can wait for you to remember how to be human." Behind them, Madeline watched with satisfaction. The Whitmore family had gambled on a mysterious girl and gained a warrior queen. The Justin family had thrown away a daughter and lost everything. And somewhere in the shadows, the Eternal Serpent sect prepared their response, not knowing they'd awakened something far more dangerous than they'd imagined. The Master had returned to her throne. And she was done being merciful. Thank you for watching and listening to the story. If you enjoyed it, subscribe and stay tuned as we will bring you more interesting stories. "Schedule a press conference for tomorrow evening," she told Madeline. "If I'm going to be famous anyway, I might as well use it." "What are you planning?" Sebastian asked. "The Eternal Serpent sect thrives in shadows, operates through proxies, hides behind legitimate businesses." Stephanie turned back to them. "So I'm going to drag them into the light. Every company they control, every politician they've bought, every dark deed they've committed, I'm going to expose all of it." "That's suicide," Madeline breathed. "If they're as powerful as you suggest." "They are." Stephanie's expression hardened. "But power built on secrets is fragile. And I'm very good at breaking fragile things." The next evening, every major network carried the press conference live. Stephanie stood at the podium in a simple black suit, the picture of composed authority, while Sebastian and Madeline flanked her. "Good evening," she began, her voice carrying to millions of viewers. "My name is Stephanie Whitmore, and I have a story to tell you about corruption, conspiracy, and a shadow organization that has been manipulating your world for decades." For the next hour, she methodically destroyed the Eternal Serpent sect. She presented documents, recordings, financial records, evidence she'd been gathering since the moment she recognized their handiwork in Larry's techniques. She named names, exposed connections, revealed the web of influence they'd woven through corporations, governments, and institutions. By the time she finished, the internet was ablaze. Law enforcement in 3 countries had already begun investigations. The sect's legitimate fronts were being raided. Their carefully constructed empire was collapsing in real time. To Elder Shin and the Eternal Serpent sect, Stephanie concluded, looking directly into the camera, "You wanted recompense? You wanted me to present myself? Here I am. The whole world is watching now. Come and collect your debt." She smiled that smile that had terrified everyone who'd seen it. "If you dare." The broadcast ended. Within minutes, Stephanie's phone exploded with notifications. Support poured in from unexpected quarters, other mystical sects who'd suffered under the Serpent's corruption, legitimate practitioners who'd been discredited by their schemes, victims who'd never understood what had been done to them. "You've started a war," Sebastian said quietly as they returned to the estate. "No," Stephanie corrected, taking his hand. "I'm finishing one that began when they decided sacred knowledge was a commodity to exploit." She looked at him, and her expression softened slightly. "But I won't ask you to fight it with me. This isn't your world." Sebastian laughed, a real laugh, full of genuine mirth. "You saved my life, exposed my would-be murderer, gave my grandmother years she wouldn't have had, and somehow made me fall in love with you in the process." He pulled her closer. "You're not getting rid of me that easily, wife." "Love?" Stephanie's eyebrow arched. "That's a strong claim for someone who's been conscious for only a week." "I had months to listen to you while I was trapped in darkness," Sebastian said seriously. "I heard every word you spoke to me. Every promise you made. Every time you stood guard." His hand cupped her face. "I knew what you were before I opened my eyes." For the first time since returning to the Justin family, Stephanie felt something crack in the walls she'd built around herself, the defenses that had kept her from feeling, from caring, from being anything but the weapon the mystic sect had trained her to be. 1 month, she reminded him, but her voice had lost its edge. 1 month, he agreed. And then another. And another. He smiled. "I'm patient. I waited 3 months in a coma. I can wait for you to remember how to be human." Behind them, Madeline watched with satisfaction. The Whitmore family had gambled on a mysterious girl and gained a warrior queen. The Justin family had thrown away a daughter and lost everything. And somewhere in the shadows, the Eternal Serpent sect prepared their response, not knowing they'd awakened something far more dangerous than they'd imagined. The Master had returned to her throne. And she was done being merciful. Thank you for watching and listening to the story. If you enjoyed it, subscribe and stay tuned as we will bring you more interesting stories.